Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the online event From Mourning to Light. And I have with me right now a wonderful speaker, and I think that you're really going to gain a lot from her talk. We've been chatting, and she has revealed some deep insights. So I can't wait for you to hear what she has to share. Her name is Barbara Rubel, and she has written a book, But I Didn't Say Goodbye. She is also a keynote speaker, and she is a specialist on traumatic grief. So without further ado, Barbara, welcome to the event.
Well, imagine being in the hospital, awaiting the birth of not one baby, not two babies, but three babies. When your husband walks into the room, hands you a box of tissues, and tells you that your father ended his life. How could dad kill himself right before becoming a grandpa? How do you end your life when your daughter's in the hospital about to give birth to triplets? I could not understand it. I know he had deteriorating discs in his back and he couldn't take the pain any longer, but it was the most saddest moment in my life. It wounded me. It changed the way I thought about the world. I always thought the world was a safe place. I always thought my dad would be there. Now the doctors kept the babies in utero for 3 more weeks and they were born, and thank God they were healthy. But I always expected my dad to walk into the room. I always expected him to be sitting in the chair holding 1, 2, or 3 of the babies, and he never showed. And it made me realize that even though I couldn't be a part of the rituals of death, attend the funeral and all that, his absence made the death very, very real. And it was at that time in life, so many years ago, where I realized I had to find meaning in this. I had to make meaning in this. I already had a degree in psychology, but I went back to school. I went to Brooklyn College and got a master's in thanatology, which is the study of death, dying, and bereavement. I was on the New Jersey chapter board for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I was involved with the American Association for Suicidology and SPAN. I got involved. I needed to do something. And as the years passed, I realized that so many suicide loss survivors like myself need to do something. I even facilitated a suicide loss support group for several years in New Jersey, where I live. Dad's suicide changed me, but it also helped me to make meaning in life, to make meaning in death, and to help other survivors like myself. So, how do we cope with such tragic, traumatic loss? I believe that we need to just get in touch with what we lost. I didn't just lose a dad, I lost a grandpa to my kids. I didn't feel safe. I was grieving. And I recognize that when you grieve, it's like a palette of color, emotional colors, physical, behavioral, spiritual. There are so many different colors, even cognitive colors of loss, religious colors of loss. As a matter of fact, when the babies were only 3 weeks old, I was up all night with these kids, right? Out triplets and feeding them and changing them. It was a whirlwind. It was a blessing, but it was a whirlwind. And I'm also grieving, but I love to paint. And I was watercolor painting, and my hand hit the glass and it spilled all over my painting. And in that moment, looking at this mess of this flower that I really liked, it was a mess. And I realized that's what my grief looks like, this palette of color. There are no stages. It's just this mess. Grief is a mess. But how do you make sense out of a mess? How do you make meaning in a mess? What do? Some people join a support group. Some people reach out to their clergy. Some talk to their best friend over and over again, and you really need someone who can listen to you share the same thing over and over and over again. Some people go to the library and read every grief book imaginable. There are two organizations, Compassion Fatigue and Centering Corp, that have all these grief resources. So people might go there and order grief books, but there's no right or wrong way to grieve. You grieve in your own way. However, when you're experiencing all these colors of loss because of your palette of grief, people can disenfranchise your grief. They could say the wrong thing. And when they say the wrong thing, it could cut like a knife. And we are wounded. But as Rumi says, that there is light that can come through the wound. What we do with the wound, because every now and then someone picks off the scab, or we have a reminder that hurts us, or we are triggered by something, a food, a smell, a holiday, the anniversary of the death, or waking up at 3 a.m. because that's when our loved one died. We never know what's going to impact us. But what we have to know, Sadie, is that we have the skill. We have the fortitude. We can get through this. How do we do that? Maybe one of the first things you can do is recognize your strength. So many people, Sadie, talk about weaknesses. I think we should move to our strengths. What is your greatest strength that's going to help you? You might say, I'm creative. So I'm going to join a group on breath work, or I'm going to join a course on Reiki. I'm going to get creative. I don't even know what that is, but I'm going to try it because I heard that it works. So being creative, how do you put that into practice to build your resilience to manage the pain of loss? Now, my greatest strength is love of learning. I am constantly reading the research on grief and suicide, traumatic loss. I'm constantly reading the research on what's now called prolonged grief disorder. So we even recognize that there is a disorder that when our grief is over a year and we're still feeling intense agony and pain and prolonged grief and yearning and pining and anxiety, that there is a DSM code for it. We are not mentally ill when we are grieving. We are normal people experiencing great pain because someone we cared about, someone we loved, was robbed from us. And that's the meaning of bereavement. To be bereaved means to be robbed. So, Sadie, when you lost your husband in that accident, and I'm so sorry that happened, you were robbed of your husband in that moment, and you were robbed of every future memory, everything that you planned in life, who you were, who you are, was shattered in that moment. So we need to focus on our grief. We need to focus on our strengths. Now, I just mentioned that my greatest strength was love of learning, but my next strength is wisdom. I love imparting that information. So I read the research, I read the books, I talk to those who are bereaved. I learn from them. They are the experts. And I impart that wisdom to others because I really believe in sharing our story, in sharing the research, in sharing what we know, whether it's about breath work or support groups or whatever it is, that we can truly learn from one another. So thank you for inviting me to be on this program today with all of your other specialists and experts. It truly is an honor to talk about something that has impacted me personally, but also I recognize that we're going to get through this, Sadie. We are going to get through this because we are not alone. We are not alone. And what we're experiencing is hard, but we have the strengths, we have the fortitude, and we have people in our community who get it. And what's really great is you're in Italy, and here I'm today in Boca Raton, Florida. And we don't have to touch in order to make meaning out of our loss. We can go online virtually and learn from one another. It is absolutely a beautiful thing.
Mm. We are very fortunate to be in this age of technology. You're quite right, Barbara. And you said so many beautiful, interesting things. Um, thank you so much for your insight. I mean, you've had many years of doing this, I can tell, and you bring you bring experience into this as well as your knowledge of having studied it, and you bring in your compassion as well. So thank you for that, Barbara. What I'd like to ask you is, besides going into what you'd like to explore creatively, how else can people equip themselves for this journey? I mean, there's community, there's being creative. What helped you personally besides painting?
There are two types of grievers. There is instrumental griever and an intuitive griever. An intuitive griever, they're the ones that emote. They cry, they need to share. They attend support groups so they could tell their story over and over again. They're the touchy-feely type people who grieve. I am what's called an instrumental griever. We are the type that do not cry. And even though you don't cry, that doesn't mean you're not grieving. I certainly loved my dad and grieved deeply for him, but I'm not a crier. And many people think that if you don't cry, there's something wrong.
Mm.
That's not true.
Mm.
What that means is that you're an instrumental griever and you need to do something. It's like Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis when she stood stoically when the president was shot. She was grieving, but she was needed to do something. So what do you need to do if you're an instrumental griever? For me, it was facilitating a suicide loss support group. It was writing the book, but I didn't say goodbye, helping families after a suicide. The last edition just came out in 2020. Now think about even the title, but I didn't say goodbye, because you could tell me as a grieving daughter that my dad loved me, that he was in pain and he couldn't live with the pain any longer, but he was proud of me. But I didn't say goodbye.
Mhm.
And as an instrumental griever, I needed to do with something that I did not have that power to say goodbye, to hold my dad when he was taking his last ebbing breath. That is an instrumental griever needing to do something,
Mm.
writing a book,
Mm.
writing a course, um, becoming a keynote speaker, offering trainings and workshops for professionals who need to understand prolonged grief disorder. I needed to do something. So what I invite your listeners and your viewers to think about right now is, what can I do with this loss? What do I need to do to move it forward? It will stay with me a lifetime, but what can I do? Do I need to write poetry and put that online? Do I need to create a website for other survivors or victims of loss? What do I need to do? And to move inward, to make meaning of your loss, to make meaning of what happened to you.
Wow, that is very, very insightful. Thank you. Wow, Barbara. Okay, so at this point, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about a gift that you would like to offer to the audience.
I think the best gift that you can give someone who's grieving is the gift of time.
Mm.
There are many resources online. What I'd like to do is just give my time. My email is my name, Barbara Rubel at barbararubel.com. I make it so easy. And what I invite you to do is to share your story in an email to me. Put it in a paragraph and allow me to share my insight, to allow you to share your grief with me. And I'd be honored to read your story, to respond to it, to answer any questions, and become grief friends, if you want to call it that, because so many people are disenfranchised by others when we share our story. When we tell people that our husband died in a certain way, and they challenge that, or my father died by suicide and they challenge that. Um, People can be cruel when you share your story. I can contain your story. So share with me what happened, and perhaps we could then focus on ways to make meaning and survive it and live with it and live with the memories and live with the triggers. Because I think God's greatest gift to us is that we remember and we can hold on to some really great memories. It's not just the story of death, it's the story of life. It's the story of their life and keeping their memory alive and keeping their name out there. What was your husband's name?
Paul.
Paul.
Yeah.
It's about Paul. It's about my dad, Alex. It's about the person who's listening right now. I invite them to just shout their loved one's name, because we are not alone. I really believe that Paul and Alex and whoever else is listening and watching, that we're not alone, that spirit world is very much a part of this. So thank you for this opportunity to talk about Paul, to talk about my dad, Alex, to allow others who are grieving to say their name. They may be dead. You may never see them again. But spiritually, you are so connected. You can continue that bond. You don't have to sever the bond. You can hold on to them in memory, and they will be a part of your memory for the rest of your life.
That is beautiful. Thank you, Barbara. The the people who are disenfranchised, they are the ones without community support. They are the ones who are coping with the shame of whatever happened to their loved one. And so for you to offer them that opportunity to share their story, and they can do it so without any fear of being judged, I think that's an incredible gift. Thank you, Barbara.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And then could you talk a little bit about your book? But I didn't get to say goodbye. So
Mhm.
so what do you say in the book, and how would the book help people?
But I Didn't Say Goodbye, Helping Families After a Suicide. The third edition came out in 2020. And thank you for inviting me to talk a little bit about it. It is the story of a child, an adolescent, who lost his dad to suicide. And he is so smart. Some people say, oh, he sounds like he's 20 or 30. Well, he sounds like me, basically, because what I did was I took a child's voice, a child's experience, and I made this child, this character, so wise because he needed to teach his mom what to do, his aunts and uncles and his grandparents. He had such wisdom because I think that children are smarter than we are. And through his voice, you learn that you can manage grief as a family, as a community, especially when it's disenfranchised by suicide, that there are organizations, that there are support groups, that there are online blogs. There's so much, especially Friends for Survival, a wonderful group online that even has a newsletter that goes to your home. SPAN, SAVE, AFSP, AAS. I incorporate all of these valuable, agencies, organizations, um, online specialists who really help the family manage the impact of loss immediately after the suicide and for 1 year after the death, because that anniversary can be hellacious for a family, all of the triggers, and people forget. And you say, okay, it's the anniversary of my loved one's death by suicide, and nobody even called me.
Mm,
And that lack of a phone call on the anniversary could trigger you. Or
mm,
seeing the words on a page that reflects your own story. Sometimes reading someone else's story and finding meaning in that helps you. So, but I Didn't Say Goodbye is a valuable resource also for counselors and therapists who are not well versed on uh, phases of grief or tasks of mourning or 6R process. Because I also talk about models of mourning, because there are no stages of grief.
mm,
And that's what my book really focuses in on. Get away from this stage-based model. It doesn't make sense. It's antiquated. It made sense in the 1970s for those who were terminally ill, but not for those who are grieving. Grief is a process. It lasts a lifetime. And through the storytelling in But I Didn't Say Goodbye, you learn about grief, how to manage it through somebody else's story. So thank you for inviting me the opportunity to talk about my book. Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Barbara. I was curious because I haven't had an opportunity to read it yet. And I love the idea of a child telling it because it puts you into a different space. It puts you into a space of playfulness, openness, because children are very simple. They see the world simplistically and they don't get too bogged down in the meandering complications that can surround our whole family with grief. So I I think it's a very clever way to write a book.
But you know what's so interesting about a child in grief? They go in their grief, they come out of their grief. They
Mm,
cry, they miss their daddy or their mommy. It's terrible. They're grieving, they can't get out of bed, but then they go out and play, or they play
mm,
ball or go on a swing. And
mm,
that's what we learn from children, that we oscillate in our grief, that it's okay to cry and or give away some items and to be in our grief and then to go to a party with friends, that
mm,
you can give yourself permission to have this dual process going in and out of grief and oscillate just like children. And it's okay. If we learn anything from children, that it is okay to grieve, but it's okay to live our lives and be happy as well. It's okay.
mm, mm. I I have heard that some people say they feel guilty. How can they be enjoying themselves? They don't allow
Acknowledge it.
themselves. They don't allow
Yeah.
themselves. They feel it's like survivor's guilt, like they're still here. And but that seems counterintuitive because you're still here. You are still here. You are still alive.
Yeah.
That's just my personal feeling. But I understand how people feel that they can't be joy. How can I feel happy? My loved one's gone. But I love the idea of children jumping in and out of their grief. That's helpful for
Eh,
people who won't
yes.
allow themselves to be happy.
Yes. And then also ask yourself the question in the voice of your loved one. So you can say,
Mm,
would Paul want me to be happy? Would Paul want me to feel this guilt, this shame, this whatever I'm feeling? Would he want that of me? And how can I live in his value of
mm,
me, his belief of what he would want from me? How can I live in that? And when we bring our loved ones spiritually into the conversation, we could acknowledge, I do feel guilty for going to the party, for laughing, for having fun when you're dead. I feel guilty about that. However, I'm managing it. I realize that there really isn't anything to feel guilty about because I'm alive and I need to live my life. And just bring them in and say, well, I know you would want me to be happy. Talk to yourself. It's okay. People might think you're crazy, but who cares? Talk to yourself.
yeah, I like that, Barbara. I like that a lot, that you you bring them into your lives every day. You talk to them, and yeah, I do that with Paul. I do that. I also
In what
have
way?
dreams, but I have dreams where he's come back and he's still alive, and I'm all confused. I'm like, but I thought you were dead. And he goes, I am. And I'm going, but you're here. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, in your experience, have you had people say that they dream their loved one has come back? Is that a common thing?
It is very common and it's in the research as well. For years, people have been talking about this. Now,
Okay.
you could be the school of thought where it's just a dream. I am
Mm,
not of that school of thought. I
mm,
truly believe that our loved ones, when they die, their spirit is so strong, they don't just disappear.
mm,
I believe that they can come back to us through our dreams. And that is the way they stay connected to us, to let us know they're okay. And sometimes it might hurt to see them in the dream or confuse us, but in essence, it is such a blessing to have them come back to us in our dream. Now, many others have told me in my support group that they are awakened in the middle of the night and they see their loved one at the edge of the bed. It's only for a split second and they breathe deeply or they want to scream out to them and then they're gone.
Mm,
I am of the school of thought where our loved one came back and was spiritually present there, that they are continuing the bond with us. So
mm,
there is no wrong or right. Sadie, if you believe that Paul is coming to you in the dream, if I believe that my father is at the edge of the bed for 2 seconds and it brings me comfort, then I don't need to ask, is it an illusion? Is it really them? I just move into what I believe, my values, my faith, my spiritual connection. And I think if we walk away from this program today, we just need to recognize that we're doing the best that we can. We are basing our grief on what we've learned, but we need to be open to learning new ways to grieve, to be accepting that we're not perfect, that we're just doing the best that we can, and that there are people out there who we could talk to virtually or in live support groups, that there are books available, or as you shared prior to this program, how you were involved with breath work and somatic experiencing and mindfulness and meditation, that some people may say, oh, that's out there, but others may say it works. I
mm,
say, whatever works for you, go for it. Just stay away from drinking, from alcohol, from drugs. Don't self-medicate because that's just going to prolong your grief experience and make it harder to cope and manage this painful experience of loss.
mm. Wow, that's very wise advice, Barbara. Thank you. So I think we've come to the end of our time. Is there anything you would like to close with, Barbara?
Yes, thank you. I would like to close by saying that grief is a lifelong process and it is not an easy thing to get over. You
Mm,
don't get over grief, it lasts a lifetime. My father died 35 years ago, and it seems like it was only yesterday. But this program allowed me to share my loss and to share some strategies for healing. I think you could take your grief and help yourself and maybe help others with whatever strategy you're using, whether it's a good book or breath work or becoming a support group facilitator, creating a blog, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. And remember that our loved ones are right there in our room with us. We are not alone. They are still spiritually connected and continue that bond. You
mm.
don't have to sever the bond because they're gone. They're very much a part of your every single day experience.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Barbara. It's been an honor speaking to you today.
Well, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you for the opportunity. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
you're welcome. So everybody, that was an amazing talk. And remember to tune in tomorrow for some more special expert speakers. And we'll see you all then.